Lila Mae Parker had always believed that love was louder than shame. She had fallen for Dale Parker under a rust-stained sunset, the kind that made the cornfields glow like fire and the air taste like hope. He had been a handsome, grease-smudged mechanic with a crooked grin and arms that knew how to both fix engines and hold her tight. Back then, Dale had said things like, "I don't care that you never finished school, Lila. You've got heart. You're smarter than any woman I know." But promises made under moonlight often fade with the sunrise. By the time their son Austin turned 7, Dale's words began to change. Where once there was kindness, there was condescension. Where once he read her menus at restaurants with gentle patience, he now snorted at her mistakes. The first time he called her stupid was after she misread a letter from Austin's school. The word hit harder than any slap. By the time Austin was 12, Dale no longer whispered his criticisms, he spat them like oil on fire. "She can't even help her own son with homework," Dale said once loudly as Austin sat hunched at the kitchen table. "What kind of mother can't read a second-grade book?" Austin laughed. Not because he meant it. Because he didn't know what else to do. And that, Lila realized, was the true breaking point. Not Dale's cruelty, but her son learning it. She tried. God, how she tried. She practiced in secret, scribbling letters late into the night, watching YouTube videos with captions, tracing grocery labels with her finger in quiet aisles. She hid literacy workbooks beneath piles of laundry, but no matter how hard she tried, the progress was slow, and Dale's disdain moved faster. Humid August evening, when the air was thick with sweat and secrets. They were hosting a small dinner for some neighbors from church. Dale had barbecued. Lila had cleaned the house until her knuckles bled. She'd written down a recipe for potato salad from a YouTube tutorial and followed it to the letter. She was proud of it. She'd even practiced saying a few sentences aloud in case someone asked her about the dish. But when she brought it to the table, Dale looked at it and said, "Loud enough for everyone to hear? Guess we'll find out if she can cook better than she can read." There was laughter, nervous, uncertain. One guest choked on his tea. Another smiled and looked away. Austin stared at his plate, cheeks flushed. Lila felt her throat tighten. The words she'd practiced vanished. The air left the room. That night, long after the guests left, Dale had the audacity to ask her what was wrong. "You embarrassed yourself," he snapped. "Don't blame me for your ignorance." She said nothing. Instead, she walked into the bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed for a long, hollow hour. Then she pulled a small duffel bag from the back of the closet, one she had quietly packed and repacked for years without ever daring to use. Inside was only what mattered: a few clothes, a photo of Austin as a toddler, and her hidden workbook, its pages smudged with ink and effort. She left no note. She didn't want to explain herself. She didn't want to beg him to see her value, or give him the satisfaction of saying goodbye. She walked out into the night with nothing but her silence, and the tiny, defiant belief that maybe she wasn't the stupid one after all. By sunrise, Dale would be brewing coffee, swearing she'd be back by noon. Austin would be asking where she went, and the town would whisper, "She just left? Without a word?" But Lila knew the truth. She hadn't disappeared. She was finally starting to exist. For weeks after Lila's disappearance, Dale Parker left the porch light on. Not because he missed her. Not exactly. It was more out of pride. The stubborn belief that no woman, especially that woman, would walk away from him for good. He told anyone who asked that she was just blowing off steam that she'd be back as soon as she realized how good she had it. "She's sensitive," he said with a smirk. "A little slow, too. But she knows she's nothing without this family." He didn't realize until much later that he had gotten one part right. Lila was sensitive enough to feel every word he'd ever thrown at her like shrapnel. Sensitive enough to see the way Austin watched her with growing embarrassment. Sensitive enough to know when love had curdled beyond saving. The porch light eventually burned out. Dale never bothered to replace it. Instead, he rewrote the story to suit his ego. "She abandoned us. She was too weak, too selfish, too dumb to keep up. The version of Lila he described to friends and neighbors became smaller, pitiful. Someone unworthy of sympathy. He never mentioned how sharp her eyes were when she listened, or how tender her hands had been when she cupped Austin's cheeks. Austin was only 10 when she left. In the beginning, he asked about her constantly. He cried for her at night, calling into the dark like she might be hiding somewhere just outside the bedroom window. Dale always gave the same answer. "She left us, son. People like her don't stick around when things get hard." Over time, the crying stopped. By the time Austin was 16, he didn't ask about Lila anymore. He didn't talk much at all. He had Dale's build now. Broad shoulders, strong arms, but none of Dale's discipline. He drifted between low grades, detentions, and short-lived friendships. Teachers called home, principals issued warnings. Dale blamed everyone but himself. The boy's lazy, he'd say, ungrateful, got too much of her in him. But Dale wasn't blind. He saw the tension in Austin's jaw when he snapped at him. He saw the way his son flinched when he raised his voice too fast, or how he shut down at even the smallest hint of judgment. What Dale refused to see was himself. At home, conversations were clipped, transactional. Did you eat? Get your grades up. Take the trash out. The silences were heavier than the words. Austin spent more time outside the house, on his bike, in the woods, at the cracked basketball court behind the closed-down church. He got in with the wrong crowd, the kind who liked to test limits and light things on fire just to watch them burn. One night, Dale got a call from the sheriff. Austin had been caught tagging the side of a convenience store with a spray can. "First offense," the deputy said. "But he's on thin ice, Dale. You better wake that boy up." Instead of grounding him, Dale exploded. "You think this is how men behave?" he yelled, veins bulging in his neck. "You want to end up like your mother, walking away from everything just because it got hard?" Austin looked him in the eye, the first time in months. She didn't walk away. "You pushed her." Dale slapped him. The sound cracked through the kitchen like a bullet. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Austin picked up his backpack, walked out the front door, and didn't come back until morning. Something shifted that night, not just in Austin, but in the air around the Parker home, a tension that couldn't be patched with a lecture or dismissed with anger. Dale found himself staring at the front door long after Austin returned. He remembered the way Lila had walked out, quiet, purposeful, full of something he had mistaken for defeat but now recognized as resolve. She had left the same way Austin had, without begging, without tears, like ghosts choosing not to haunt a house that refused to see them. By Austin's 17th birthday, Dale had all but given up. The school threatened expulsion. Austin barely spoke to him. And the toolbox that once held Dale's pride now sat gathering dust in the garage. He didn't know it yet, but a letter, clean white envelope, heavy with hope, was already on its way. And for the first time in years, Lila Mae Parker was about to re-enter their lives. Not as a memory, but as a force neither of them saw coming. The envelope arrived on a Thursday afternoon, wedged between a plumbing catalog and an overdue utility bill. Dale barely noticed it at first. He was too busy muttering about the rising cost of gas and the leaking pipe under the kitchen sink. The envelope didn't look special. No logo, no bright colors, just a heavy, off-white rectangle with his son's name handwritten in careful cursive, Austin Parker. Austin found it when he got home from school. Late, again. His hair was damp from the rain. His hoodie clung to his back like it had soaked up everything he couldn't say. Dale was on the couch, snoring with the TV on, a beer half empty beside him. Austin walked past the flickering screen, the static hum of a rerun laugh track, and saw the envelope on the table. He stared at it for a long time before picking it up. No return address. No stamp. Just his name, as if someone had hand-delivered it and slipped away before the door opened. He tore it open carefully, almost reverently. Inside was a letter printed on thick paper, topped with a gold-embossed seal that shimmered faintly in the living room light. The Parker Institute for Learning and Growth Scholarship offer. Full tuition award. Austin's heart thudded. He read the first paragraph twice, then a third time, unsure if he was understanding it correctly. It spoke of an amazing nomination of a merit-based scholarship offered to students with hidden potential in underserved communities. It mentioned small class sizes, mentorship programs, personal development workshops. It felt like something out of a movie. It was only after reading the letter a fourth time that the name hit him, the Parker Institute. "Hey," he said, holding the letter up. "Did you know about this?" Dale blinked awake, groggy and confused. "What the hell are you waving at me?" Austin dropped the letter in his lap. Dale read in silence for a few seconds, then frowned. "What kind of scam is this?" "It's not a scam," Austin snapped. "It's a school. They want me to go there. Full ride." Dale read it again, slower this time. When he got to the name, the Parker Institute, his jaw twitched. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. "That's our name." Austin shrugged. "So?" Dale sat up straighter, suddenly alert. "So either someone's screwing with us, or it's a damn coincidence." "Who cares?" Austin said, brushing him off. "It's legit. Look, website, signature, even an orientation date. This isn't fake." Dale stood up, letter in hand, pacing. "Why would a fancy place like this want you?" That landed like a slap. Austin looked away. He'd gotten used to Dale's bluntness, but every now and then, it still stung like the first time. "I don't know," he said quietly. "But they do." Dale stared at the letter, brow furrowed. "I don't like this. This smells off." "Maybe it's the best thing that's ever happened to me," Austin snapped, stepping forward. "Did you think of that? Maybe someone saw something in me that you never did." There was a long silence. Then Dale, without meeting his son's eyes, muttered, "Do what you want." Austin did. 2 weeks later, he stood in front of the wide glass doors of the Parker Institute, a single duffel slung over his shoulder. The building was sleek, modern, white stone, steel beams, windows that stretched from floor to ceiling like open eyes. There was a logo carved into the wall outside the entrance, a stylized tree, its roots and branches intertwined. Austin ran his fingers over the plaque underneath. "Where no one is forgotten. Where no mind is wasted." There was no mention of the founder, no glossy portrait, just that motto. As he walked through the doors, a woman at the front desk handed him a welcome packet and a sleek black folder. Inside was a schedule, a map of the campus, and a handwritten note on thick, creamy paper. "Dear Austin, I believe in the students who have been told they'll never amount to anything. Sometimes the world needs to hear your story before it sees your worth. Welcome home. M." He stared at the signature. Just one letter. M. The penmanship was elegant, measured. Familiar, though he couldn't place why. A name began to form in the back of his mind, half-remembered and buried beneath years of silence. But it wasn't until he stepped into his dorm room and opened his new textbooks, crisp pages, untouched, that Austin realized something else. He wanted to learn. For the first time in his life, someone expected something of him other than failure. And he wasn't going to waste it. The Parker Institute was unlike anywhere Austin had ever been. It didn't feel like a school. It felt like a whispering promise, one that spoke through the gleaming hallways and silent libraries. You are not your past. From day one, everything was different. Teachers addressed him with warmth, not warnings. Classmates didn't know his history, didn't flinch when he spoke. For the first time, he wasn't the kid with the absent mother or Dale Parker's mess of a son. Here, he was just Austin. And still, there was something off. Not bad, exactly. Just mysterious. From his first orientation meeting, it became clear the school's founder was somewhat of a legend and a phantom. She was simply referred to as M, never a full name, never a photograph, no public appearances, no speeches, no videos. There were rumors, of course. Some students said she was a retired billionaire. Others whispered she was once homeless, that she'd built the school from scratch after losing everything. What was undeniable was her presence. Her fingerprints were on everything. Lesson plans that emphasized empathy and resilience, daily affirmations written in elegant cursive across chalkboards, and a mentorship program unlike anything Austin had ever encountered. That was how he met her, sort of. Each scholarship student was paired with a mentor, but Austin's was different. His mentor's identity was anonymous. Her letters arrived every Sunday, tucked neatly into his mailbox with no return address. Her voice came in short audio notes sent through a private school app, always labeled only as M. At first, it felt strange, like being watched by someone he couldn't see. But it didn't take long for M's words to sink under his skin. You don't owe anyone proof of your worth. You only owe yourself the chance to grow. Your anger is not your identity. It's a symptom of what's been denied to you. You are not broken. You were underestimated. She never mentioned his mother, never asked about Dale, but somehow everything she said made him feel seen, as if she knew exactly where his scars were, even the ones no one else had noticed. Her audio messages were always short, less than 2 minutes, but they carried the kind of stillness Austin hadn't felt in years. Her voice was calm, deliberate, with a quiet strength that drew him in, and while he couldn't place why, there was something hauntingly familiar about it. Each week, her words stayed with him longer. He began to write back. Not full letters, just journal-style reflections submitted anonymously through the mentorship system. He talked about his failures, his confusion, even the nights he still dreamed of a woman he barely remembered holding his hand through storms. She replied without judgment, only with clarity, with warmth. Sometimes, it felt like he was talking to a ghost. One afternoon, after a particularly rough math exam, he sat alone beneath the sprawling sycamore tree in the school's central courtyard. He had received another letter that morning from M, one that read, "You will stumble, you will doubt. But someday, Austin, you will stand in front of someone you once feared, and you will not flinch. You'll be taller, even if they don't notice. That will be the day you realize you've outgrown their shadow." The words stopped him cold. How did she know? How did she know he still flinched at his father's voice, still measured himself against a man who only saw failure? He folded the letter slowly, reverently, and looked up at the building that bore his family's name. It no longer felt like a coincidence. The Parker Institute. The secretive founder. The handwriting that stirred something he couldn't yet name. He didn't tell anyone about the letters. Not even his roommate, Jordan, who had begun to notice the change in him. More focused, more open, less angry. "You got some secret girlfriend or something?" Jordan joked one night. "You've been weirdly zen lately." Austin only smiled. In a way, he was falling in love. With something he'd never had before. Belief. In himself. In second chances. In a voice that reached through time and shame to pull him toward something better. Still, questions began to collect, like dust in his mind. Who was M? Why him? And why did her words sound so much like the voice he used to imagine reading bedtime stories? The mystery deepened, and with it, something else awakened in Austin, a hunger. Not just for knowledge or success, but for truth. Because somewhere behind the walls of this perfect place, someone was watching. And that someone knew exactly who he was. The day Dale Parker first stepped foot on the grounds of the Parker Institute, he felt like an intruder. The building stood like quiet monuments to something he didn't understand. Modern, gleaming structures surrounded by manicured gardens and polished stone walkways. It was too clean. Too perfect. Nothing like the grease-stained shop floors and sun-baked roads he'd spent his life crawling through. He didn't belong here, and he knew it the moment the security guard at the front gate looked at him with cautious politeness. "I'm here for my son," Dale had said gruffly. "Austin Parker." The guard checked his list, then waved him through. Parents had been invited to campus for a special Family Insight Day, a carefully curated event to show how the Institute was reshaping young minds. Dale hadn't planned to attend, but something about that name, the Parker Institute, had lodged itself in his brain like a splinter he couldn't pull out. He told himself it was a coincidence, a fluke. Maybe someone else had the same name. Richer people, smarter ones. Still, it gnawed him. Inside the main building, sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting warm gold across marble floors. Banners hung from the ceilings bearing inspirational quotes. One of them read, "No one is forgotten, no mind is wasted." Dale rolled his eyes. Soft people nonsense, he thought, but then he noticed something that made him stop. In the atrium was a large wall display titled, "Foundations, the Origin of the Parker Institute." Photographs of smiling students, classrooms in progress, and the early blueprints of the school lined the wall. In the center was a portrait, not a face, just a silhouette. The founder stood with her back to the camera, gazing out over a construction site. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and a long coat. Her stance was quiet but firm, determined. Dale's heart paused. There was something in the curve of the woman's shoulders, something in the way she stood. He leaned in. No caption, no name. Just a line underneath. "The founder prefers anonymity. Her work speaks for itself." He stared for a long time. Then a woman beside him, a sharp-faced mother in a tailored coat, leaned over and said in a hushed voice, "They say she was homeless once. Built all this after clawing her way up from nothing." Dale's throat tightened. "Who told you that?" The woman shrugged. "Everyone knows. She was some nobody. Worked nights, self-taught. Built a literacy program out of a church basement. Then one day, bam, she gets investors. Opens the institute. No interviews, no photos. Just letters and vision." Dale turned away, suddenly needing air. The scent of lavender and clean tile was choking him. He found himself walking down a quiet hallway, the noise of the event behind him fading. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Answers, maybe. Or proof that his instincts were wrong. That the ghost tugging at the edge of his mind wasn't her. A janitor passed him and nodded. "Looking for something, sir?" Dale shook his head. "Just wandering." He ended up in the small school museum, a room filled with artifacts from the early days of the Institute. Handwritten lesson plans, donation ledgers, a wall of thank you notes from students. Most were typed. Some were written in shaky block letters, and a few, in elegant, swirling cursive, were signed simply M. He traced his finger along the glass display, stopping at a journal entry framed beneath a soft spotlight. "I was told I wasn't smart enough to be a mother, let alone a teacher. That words were too big for me, but I've learned that every voice matters, even broken ones. Especially broken ones." M. Dale felt his stomach drop. He didn't remember Lila ever writing like that, didn't think she could. But now he wasn't so sure. He left the building quickly, the skin on his neck prickling. Something about this place, its warmth, its silence, was crawling under his skin. It was like someone had taken all the parts of him he'd buried, all the mistakes he'd refused to name, and painted them across the walls in gold. That night he dreamed of Lila, not the version he'd rewritten for years, not the silent, defeated housewife, but a version he barely recognized. Strong, poised, distant. Standing in front of a school built with her name hidden, her power quiet, and her revenge patient. The library at the Parker Institute was a sanctuary. Rows of books stretched from floor to ceiling, their spines whispering stories and secrets. Soft light spilled from overhead fixtures, casting a golden glow on worn wooden tables and plush chairs. It was a place where silence wasn't empty. It was full of possibility. Austin had spent hours here over the past weeks, losing himself in textbooks and stories that once felt out of reach. The hum of pages turning became a comfort, a steady rhythm replacing the chaos of his past. One rainy afternoon, as a storm rumbled in the distance, Austin wandered into a rarely used section near the back, an old archive room with glass cabinets filled with artifacts from the Institute's early days. His eyes caught on a stack of dusty folders, labeled simply, "Early Student Records." Curiosity tugged him forward. He pulled one folder free and opened it carefully. Inside were faded letters, typed and handwritten, some creased with age. As he sifted through, a particular bundle caught his attention, a series of letters written in flowing, feminine cursive. The ink was slightly smudged, as if the writer had pressed too hard with the pen. Austin's heart quickened as he recognized the handwriting. It matched the signature on the letters from his mysterious mentor, M. His fingers trembled as he unfolded one letter dated nearly a decade ago. "Dear Mom, I know you don't read these, but I have to try. I want you to know I'm trying to be better, to make something of myself. I remember how you said the world would never be kind to someone who can't read. I want to prove them wrong. For you, for me. Love, Sarah." Another letter, this one unsigned, followed. "Mom, you taught me strength without words. Maybe one day I'll teach you to read the language of hope. Until then, I carry your courage." Austin sat back, breathless. He couldn't shake the feeling that these weren't ordinary letters. They were a bridge between a mother who couldn't read and a daughter who was determined to rewrite their story. He looked closer and found a name scrawled faintly at the bottom of one letter, Lila Mae Parker. His mother's name. A cold shiver ran down Austin's spine. Why had these letters never been sent? Why were they hidden here, forgotten? He searched the room for more clues and found a teacher, Ms. Henderson, known for her quiet wisdom, approaching the doorway. "Looking for something special?" she asked gently. Austin showed her the letters. Her eyes softened. "Those are some of the earliest letters we've kept. From one of our first students to her mother, who was unable to read. It was a difficult time. Back then, the founder was working tirelessly to create a place where families like theirs could heal together." Austin's voice caught. "The founder was my mother?" Miss Henderson hesitated, then nodded. "She never wanted the spotlight. She chose to stay behind the scenes, focused on the work. But yes, Lila Mae Parker is the woman who started all this." The weight of her words settled on Austin like a storm cloud. "Why didn't she come back?" he asked. "Sometimes," Ms. Henderson said softly, "love is not enough to fix a broken home. But what she built here, it was her way of healing, of teaching others what she couldn't learn herself." Austin closed the folder, his mind racing. The letters were a confession, a promise, a map of pain and perseverance he hadn't known existed. He realized then that the M who had mentored him all these weeks wasn't just a mysterious benefactor. She was his mother, silent, powerful, watching from the shadows. For the first time, Austin understood the depth of her sacrifice and the magnitude of the journey they were about to take together. The auditorium was packed. Rows upon rows of parents, teachers, and students filled the seats, their murmurs swelling into a low hum that echoed beneath the vaulted ceiling. The Parker Institute's annual awards ceremony was a grand event, celebrating triumphs, perseverance, and the promise of futures reborn. Austin sat near the front, his chest tight with nerves. Months of effort, transformation, and secret letters had led to this moment. He glanced at the program in his hands, feeling the weight of expectation pressing down like the spotlight waiting to find him. When his name was finally called, he rose, every eye turning his way. The walk to the stage was a blur of faces, some smiling, others curious, some skeptical. Austin's heart pounded louder than the applause greeting him. Taking the microphone, he cleared his throat and looked out over the crowd. "I stand here today not just as a student of the Parker Institute," he began, voice steady but raw, "but as someone who was given a second chance." He paused, swallowing memories of nights filled with anger, shame, and unanswered questions. There was a time when I believed I was nothing but the sum of my failures, an angry kid with no future, abandoned by the people who were supposed to love me. A hush fell over the room. But this school, he continued, this place and the people behind it, have shown me that no one is beyond hope. His gaze flickered toward the stage's side where the faculty sat. But he didn't stop there. I want to thank the woman who believed in me when no one else did. The woman who never asked for credit, never sought praise, but changed my life through her vision and strength. At that moment, the headmaster stepped forward, a small wooden plaque in his hands. As a symbol of our gratitude, the headmaster said, we dedicate this new learning center to the founder of this institute, whose courage and conviction built this school from the ground up. The lights dimmed briefly as a screen descended, unveiling an elegant bronze plaque. Austin's breath caught. Engraved in bold, dignified letters was a name he hadn't dared to speak aloud for years. Lila Mae Parker Learning Center. The crowd erupted into applause. From somewhere deep in the back, Dale felt his knees weaken. He gripped his chair, staring in disbelief. The woman he had dismissed, mocked, and driven away was now immortalized in gold and stone, a name that would forever be associated with hope, transformation, and the future of countless children. Austin stepped down from the stage, his heart swelling with something he hadn't felt in years: pride. As the ceremony continued, whispers fluttered through the crowd. Did you hear? That's his mother's name. Hard to believe, isn't it? The woman behind it all? Dale sat frozen, the sound of clapping fading into a haunting echo. He realized in that moment how deeply he had underestimated her. She hadn't been the broken, uneducated woman he thought he knew. She had been a force, a storm brewing quietly beneath his feet. And now, her legacy was undeniable. After the ceremony, Austin found himself outside the building, staring at the plaque shimmering under the moonlight. He traced the letters with his fingertips, a name that was more than a name, a symbol of resilience, of forgiveness, of a future still waiting to be written. The applause still rang in Dale's ears long after the auditorium had emptied. He wandered through the now silent halls of the Parker Institute like a man sleepwalking through a dream. No, a nightmare. The name he had seen engraved on that plaque repeated in his mind like a drumbeat. Lila Mae Parker. His wife. The woman he'd driven away. The woman he'd mocked into silence. The woman he hadn't seen in years. And now, she had built this place, this empire of hope, wisdom, and grace, with his last name shining like a crown over every doorway. He found himself outside the glass double doors marked Founder's Wing Staff Only. A young staffer passing by gave him a look but didn't stop him. He was still wearing the visitor's badge from the ceremony, and his face must have looked serious enough to deter questions. Dale stepped inside, heart pounding like a fist inside his chest. He didn't know what he was expecting: a lavish office, maybe, or a cold reception desk with an assistant ready to turn him away. What he didn't expect was silence. The hallway was softly lit, the walls adorned with framed letters and student artwork. Quotes in elegant cursive were stenciled along the edges of the ceiling. You don't need permission to become who you were meant to be. Literacy is not a privilege. It is a reclamation of voice. He stopped in front of a door slightly ajar. Through it, he could hear the low hum of a familiar voice, one he hadn't heard in nearly a decade. Steady, calmer, but undeniably hers. He pushed the door open slowly. Inside, standing by the window with her back to him, was Lila. She wore a soft cream blouse and navy slacks, simple, elegant, unlike anything he remembered. Her hair, once tied back in frizzy haste, now fell in soft curls around her shoulders. She didn't turn around right away. She didn't need to. She already knew who stood behind her. I wondered when you'd come, she said, still facing the window. Her voice wasn't cold, it wasn't angry, it was resolved. Dale swallowed hard. I saw the plaque. I assumed you would. she said, finally turning. Their eyes met for the first time in 9 years, and Dale barely recognized her. The quiet desperation that had once filled her gaze was gone. In its place was something steel-forged and luminous. Confidence tempered by pain, strength born from survival. "I didn't come here to fight," Dale said, unsure of why he felt the need to defend himself. Lila gave a small, humorless smile. "That's good. I stopped fighting with ghosts years ago." "I didn't know," he said, voice low. "About this, about any of this." "No," she agreed. "You didn't care to." Those 4 words landed like a blade. He opened his mouth, but she held up a hand. "I'm not here to rehash the past, Dale. You had your version of it. I lived the real one." "I was angry," he said. "Confused I was." "Cruel," she interrupted, her voice sharper now. "You were cruel, Dale. Not confused. You didn't just mock me, you erased me. And worse, you taught our son to be ashamed of me." That made him flinch. Lila stepped closer, her eyes never leaving his. "Do you know what it's like to be laughed at by your own child? To see the love in his eyes replaced by embarrassment? Because the man he looks up to treats his mother like she's stupid?" Dale's eyes burned. He had no words. "I didn't leave because I gave up," she continued. "I left because I had to become someone my son could one day respect. And I couldn't do that in a house where I was treated like furniture, used, ignored, and dusted off only when needed." "But you watched him," Dale said, finally finding his voice. "You knew what he was doing, what he needed. All this time, you stayed close." She nodded. "He deserved a future that didn't start with pity. I created that from the shadows, because I knew if I showed my face too soon, I'd be dismissed before I got through the door." Dale stared at her, stunned. "You learned to read. You did all this." "I taught myself with old library books and shelter volunteers. I read flashcards under street lamps. I studied at night while folding laundry in strangers' homes. I built my first program with donated paper and pencils. I failed 100 times. And every time I heard your voice in my head saying I couldn't, I did it anyway." Silence settled between them, heavy with all that had gone unsaid. "I don't expect forgiveness," Dale said quietly. "I just want to understand how to fix this." "You don't fix what you shattered," Lila replied. "You learn how to build something new, with your own hands this time, not by silencing others." She walked past him, pausing at the door. "But you're not the one who needs healing, Dale. Austin is." And with that, she left him standing alone in the room she had once built, with nothing but her silence and her will. The day after the ceremony, Austin didn't go to class. He wandered the quiet edge of campus instead, cutting through the back garden where the school's founders had once laid bricks by hand. His mind was a swirling storm, grief, anger, relief, confusion, all crashing into one another without mercy. The sun was out, but he felt cold, numb. The woman he had mourned for years hadn't died. She had risen. Lila Mae Parker, his mother, M. The realization was still unraveling inside him like thread being pulled from his chest. All the letters, all the advice, the voice that had saved him. It had been hers. And she had known every step of the way who he was. Why didn't she tell him? Why didn't she come back? And now, here he was, 17 years old, trying to piece together a childhood built on half-truths and silence. By mid-afternoon, he returned to the main building, where the school counselor, Ms. Ramirez, gently let him know, "Your parents are here. Both of them." Both. The word hit him like a fist. He found them in a private conference room, neutral furniture, no windows, a quiet ticking clock. Dale stood awkwardly in the corner, hands clenched behind his back. Lila sat near the far end of the table, composed but alert, her gaze cautious as he entered. Austin didn't speak at first. He just stood in the doorway, letting them sweat. You lied to me, he said finally, his voice low, shaking. Lila stood slowly. I didn't lie. You vanished. You let me believe you didn't care. That you were weak. That you ran. I did run, she admitted. But not from you. She stepped closer, carefully. I left because staying would have killed me, and would have taught you that a man can crush a woman with words and still be called a father. Dale flinched. Austin turned to him. You told me she left us, he snapped. You made me hate her. I didn't, Dale started, but Austin cut him off. You did. You said she was selfish, that she couldn't handle life. You made her out to be useless. Dale's voice cracked. I didn't know what else to say. You were a kid. I didn't want you blaming me. But it was you, Austin shouted. You were the reason she left. Lila put a hand on Austin's shoulder. I'm not asking you to hate him. I never have. He looked at her, tears brimming. Why didn't you come back? I wanted to, she whispered, every day. But I needed to build something first, something real. I needed to prove to myself that I could stand on my own before I came back and faced you. Why didn't you tell me who you were? Why pretend to be someone else? She took a long breath. Because you didn't need a mother in that moment. You needed a mentor, a voice you could trust. If I had told you too soon, you might have shut me out. And I couldn't risk losing you again, not until you were ready. Austin sat down heavily, burying his face in his hands. The silence stretched, filled only by the sound of the ticking clock and the rise and fall of 3 unsteady breaths. Dale finally spoke, his voice ragged. I've failed you both. I thought I was doing the right thing, being tough, being strong. But all I did was repeat what was done to me. That's no excuse. I destroyed something beautiful because I couldn't see past my own ignorance. He looked at Austin, his face hollowed by years of unspoken guilt. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But if there's any way to be part of your life, I'll work for it. I'll show up. I'll change. Austin stared at him, heart thudding. I don't want promises, he said. I want proof. Lila nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. And he'll give it, she said softly. Or he'll lose both of us for good. The 3 of them sat in silence, the air heavy with truth. Not the kind that heals, the kind that cuts deeper, but also clears the way for something real, something new. 3 weeks after the confrontation, the Parker family sat under the same roof for the first time in nearly a decade. It wasn't a reconciliation, not yet, but it was a beginning. Lila had invited them both to a quiet, open house, hosted by the Institute's outreach branch, a modest literacy program she had once run alone in a church basement. Now it had dozens of staff and hundreds of volunteers across the state. But this event wasn't about donors or accolades. It was about people trying to change. Dale showed up early, a little too early. He wore his best flannel shirt, pressed, if still fraying at the cuffs. He hadn't spoken much since that day in the conference room, but what he had done mattered more. He had enrolled in night classes at the community college downtown. GED prep, literacy fundamentals, and a parenting workshop. Quietly, without asking anyone to notice. But Lila noticed. She saw the way he no longer barked defensively, how his posture had changed, less like a man guarding his pride, more like a man trying to uncover it. She didn't let her guard down completely. Forgiveness wasn't a door you flung open. It was one you slowly unlatched, inch by inch. Austin arrived halfway through the event and found Dale sitting near the back, watching a student presentation. Instead of his usual awkwardness, Austin slid into the seat beside him with a small nod. They're opening a new site, Austin said quietly. Mom asked if I wanted to help design it. Dale looked over, unsure. And? Austin shrugged. I said yes. A pause. Then he added, she's naming it after me. Dale blinked. She is? Austin nodded. The Austin Parker Literacy Center. She said it's not because I'm her son, but because I chose to learn after unlearning a lifetime of anger. Dale rubbed a hand over his face, clearly holding something back. That's big. It is. Then, after a long breath, Austin said, I think she sees something in you, too. Even if you don't yet. That evening, just before the crowd began to thin, Lila stood at the front of the room beside a large, covered easel. The audience quieted as she spoke, not with theatrics, but with the quiet assurance of someone who had earned every word. Years ago, I was a woman with no voice. I couldn't read. I couldn't write. But worse than that, I believed the people who told me I wasn't worth educating, that I wasn't smart enough, that I wasn't enough. She looked out at the crowd, eyes resting briefly on Dale, then on Austin. But I learned. I grew. And when I stood on my own for the first time, I didn't look back for applause. I looked back for others like me. Those left behind. She pulled the cloth from the easel. Beneath it was a design sketch of the new center, a warm, welcoming building with open-air classrooms, gardens, and community libraries. At the top was the name, bold and proud, the Austin Parker Literacy Center. The room broke into applause, but for Lila, the moment wasn't about noise, it was about release. Afterward, as people mingled and took photos, Dale approached her outside the building, hands in his pockets, eyes lowered. I've been going to class, he said. She nodded. I know. I still mess up, still trip over the words sometimes. You'll get there. He looked up, his voice gravel soft. I'm trying, not just with the books, with how I see you, and our son, and myself. There was a long pause. Then Lila said, I don't need you to become someone new, Dale. I need you to stop pretending the old version didn't break things. I know, he said. I'm trying to be honest. It's not easy. Good, she replied, a small smile forming. Real change never is. Later, under the soft light of dusk, Austin stood beside her as construction crews packed up the site of the future center. He looked at the blueprint again, then at the woman who had once disappeared from his life only to rebuild it behind the scenes. You ever think about how different things could have been? He asked. Lila didn't hesitate. I used to, not anymore. Why? Because we're writing it now, not the past, the ending. He nodded, quietly taking her hand, and as the sun dipped low behind the horizon, their shadows stretched forward, not behind them, but towards something new.